So I said, Lenka, 2 weeks ago, you had your every 3-year big worldwide congress, and you had representatives from about 80 countries, I think, something like that, maybe even more. I would like to know what was the importance of this topic of cooperation, public and private, in the agenda of the conference, and overall, what's the vision of WAPES and your members on this very key topic of cooperation, public-private?
Okay, first of all, I want to thank Ciett, not only for inviting me, but also for giving me a role, an active role, in the conference. WAPES tries every year to join the Ciett conference, like Dennis said, because from our point of view, cooperation, private, public employment services is very important. And during our WAPES World Congress, a few weeks ago, in the beginning of May, about the new world of work, we were, of course, speaking also about cooperation, public-private employment services. I'm thinking about topics like employment services and decent work. Annemie told this morning. The private employment services are trying to find always decent work for people. We were speaking also about another kind of private persons, that's the employers. So we were speaking about what are the needs of the employers nowadays. How can we find, how can we detect what they need? What do they expect from us, the public employment services, and how can the public employment services adapt to these needs? And then there were also topics about something I had a masterclass this afternoon about self-employment. Here also there is very often cooperation needed between private and public employment services.
Okay. When it comes to public employment services, we hear more and more that, as such, they would like to play a role as a conductor in the labor market. Kind of as a conductor, like in an orchestra, you have someone, driving all the different instruments and music players. And there had been several documents from, the public employment services saying, yeah, we as the public employment services, we see ourselves as being, in a way, being in the driving seat when it comes to coordinating the work of all the employment services. Could you tell us a bit more about that? And also this morning we had this presentation from Mr. Abravanel when he said that the labor market of today looks like like an orchestra, but like a jazz orchestra, where there is no partition and everybody is some kind, making some improvisation. So it's a bit of a joke, but how would you position the public employment services when it comes to the orchestra?
Yeah, you are speaking about an orchestra. In Belgium, they are looking at it like making a film. And the producer of the film is then the public employment service. And there are a lot of partners involved in this. What is very interesting in the Belgian model, it's the north of Belgium, the Flemish model, is that all partners dealing with employment are using the same IT systems. This makes it very easy to follow up on placement, on job seekers, on employment or unemployment. So for example, when Adecco, I'm just giving an example, when Adecco is finding a job for somebody, they put it in the system, the same system, as the system used by the public employment service. And it works very well. So the philosophy there is, let's all work together. Everybody has its own expertise, and it's very different from country to country. And everybody can help to make, so that job seekers can find a job. I have a totally different example, and it's from Kenya. The Public Employment Service of Kenya is very, very little. They don't have a lot of resources, but they have very good experts. So, on the other hand, we have the privates. The privates have a bad reputation because they are asking money from the job seekers. You know better than me what people are saying about privates when they want to say bad things. So what do? If a private thinks that the service they give is really according to what you can expect from a good working private employment service, they go to the public make an assessment, and give them a certificate. With this certificate, the job seekers are sure that they can trust the private employment service. I think this is also a very nice example of cooperation between the two. In any case, I think cooperation is much better than what we experienced in November last year in Colombia, where Public Employment Service opened an office in a district next to the industry where there were a lot of privates and were killed by the privates. This is something, of course, we have all of us to avoid.
Yeah, I don't think this is the understanding of cooperation, even non-cooperation, of course. Agostino, I would like to turn to you. Well, you represent actually the private employment services in Italy. So from your point of view, from your experience point of view, how would you assess today the cooperation between Assolavoro members in Italy and the public employment services? Do you feel being part of an orchestra? Are you a musician there? What kind of instruments do you play? And yeah, how would you assess? I know in Italy, public employment services are very much organized at the regional level, and sometimes it creates, different situations according to regions. So, could you tell us a bit more about the state of play of the cooperation today in Italy?
Yes, Dennis, first of all, thank you for the invitation and for your compliments. I
We
pay
are
you
invited
later
by
as
you.
agreed. Okay. No, one of the problems of our country is that we have not one orchestra, but we have 20 orchestra because our public politics for labor are split at regional level. So one of the problems is to coordinate at national level all these measures. For Assolavoro, for our member, the cooperation with the public sector is fundamental. For this reason, during the last 10 years, we signed a lot of agreement with the region and public institution in order to improve this kind of cooperation. It's a very difficult strategy and a difficult way for us because we have a lot of difficulties. Because for each region, we have to negotiate it with the political level, and then in the same region with the technician level, and then with the trade unions. So it's a sort of Rubik cube in order to, but in some region, 5 or 6 in Italy, we have a very good cooperation. The best region by this point of view is Lombardy region, where is a very competitive and liberal framework in which private agency and public sector can work on the same floor with the same rules. So everybody can put on the floor this professionality and so on. But in my opinion now in Italy the sound is changing, especially starting from youth guarantee that during the last year it started in Italy for one reason. For the first time in our country, the government, the Minister of Labor has defined some standard cost and some centralized level of services for some measure. And we hope in the future that we can start from this experience in order to reorganize our orchestra. But there is also a normative question. Now our parliament is approving a reform of our constitution in order to put at the national level some competencies for training, for example, or labor activities at the national level. And so we think that in the future will be a good way in order to have one sound in our country.
Okay, so a movement towards, again, some kind of centralization of management of the public employment services that would welcome because it will make your life easier as
the question is complex because one question is to define rules that we can follow in order to define our investment in our network, for example, in the south of the country. And this is a prerequisite for our work. The second question is to define policy that are linked to the regional specificity. And so So now is the game is how to combine the first necessity with the different labor market that we have in this country. Maybe we have to try to find a new balance between these two questions.
Two levels. Okay, thank you. Thérèse, moving to you. It seems that you are playing in a global orchestra because the company you represent is actually a global company. You have operations in several countries around the world. But first of all, I said earlier, I would like you to explain a bit more, to elaborate a bit more on, Ingeus as a company and describing the services you provide, because, as I said, Ingeus is a welfare to work, company. This is a different type of services being offered. This is a different business model also compared to most of the Ciett members. So I think it would be worth for you explaining first what exactly do you do in the labor market. So in which kind of orchestra do you play, if any? And then we can have a few more questions then.
Thank you again. Thank you for having us all here today, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Ingeus is a company that works in complex human transformation, helping people in 12 countries move from being long-term unemployed to gaining a sense of how they're going to contribute in the labour market, and recovering hope and recovering confidence, making sure they have the right skills for the job, and then they are placed into work, and we support them through the period of adapting to and stabilising in work. Quite often we work with Ciett members to find decent, lasting work for our clients, but we are engaged with them often well before they are even looking for work or even applying for a job, and well after, once they're actually placed.
Okay, I already heard two words that we have in common, which was pride and confidence. This is some words we, as an industry, want to use more and more, so that's already a good start. But back to the cooperation public-private, how would you explain the role your company plays when it comes to public employment services and active labour market policies?
So public employment services determine and have. So firstly, public employment services are working within the policy framework of the government of the day. That changes. So depending on which government is in and which minister is in, the framework under which they are working changes. And sometimes the government of the day wants the public employment service to be the only provider. Sometimes they want the employment service to focus on short-term unemployed people, and then they want other providers to come in and work with people who are longer-term unemployed. The first thing to say is this is obviously political. It's a political framework in which we're all working. For Ingeus, we started with injured workers who couldn't return to their pre-injury occupation because of the nature of their injury. And so we were working with people with acquired disabilities, often who felt like they had hit a brick wall because they couldn't go on with what they were doing before. And then the Public Employment Service in Australia, which is where we started, we had gone into a recession in Australia, and they approached us and said, we have a lot of people who are 3-year plus unemployed who are unlikely to be just taken up by the labour market as we come out of the recession. Can you help us with them? And what we heard this morning from the OECD is that there is a growing proportion of people who are long-term unemployed, very long-term unemployed. As the available candidate pool is hit both by the ageing West and by and by growing economies, then the people who are easily available in the labour market also have more complex issues. So we tend to be collaborating with public employment services to work with people who have highly complex multiple issues and to help them get those things resolved. Sometimes they're practical, sometimes they're cognitive, sometimes they're skills related, and then to help them find the right job and then stay in employment. So the partnership depends on the policy framework of the government of the day, has to have the right procurement framework around it, but for us is very specialised.
But overall, would you see a kind of a similar trends depending on countries? Do you feel that, you know, across the world, more and more governments are indeed looking for the support of private suppliers, private employment agencies, or companies like yours to help them to implement active labour market policies? Or this is really, you know, different according to countries?
It really depends on which country, although what we see is through the auspices of organisations like WAPES that governments are learning what is possible. They're learning from the OECD that, for example, in the Australian environment, there was a threefold increase in outcomes for half the cost. So that's a sixfold increase in productivity. They're learning about, you know, the problems of purchasing services from private providers. They're learning about some of the solutions to that, and they're learning how to manage contracts as well. So I think there is an increasing interest from the public employment services generally in how this might work. And there's also an interest, though, in how they might internalise some of the learning about measurement of performance and transparency of performance and a range of other things.
Okay, thank you. One of the points you raised, and now I'm turning to Lenka and Agostino, when it comes to the support to be provided to job seekers, is whether public employment services should focus on the most, you know, difficult job seekers to reintegrate into the labour market. And this is what sometimes it is called the creaming effect, knowing that public employment services should focus, as I said, on the most vulnerable workers or job seekers, while what the private can do easily, it should be given to the private sector. And this morning, Stefano Scarpetta mentioned the example of Netherlands, where in Netherlands, 2/3, I think, of the branches of the public employment services have been closed over the last couple of years. And clearly, the main mission of the public employment services in Netherlands is to focus on the 10% of the job seekers that are the most difficult to reintegrate into the labour market. Lenka, is there kind of a common understanding and acceptance of this approach, or this is very specific to Netherlands and a few countries? Yeah. What's the position of WAPES members on that? The creaming effect.
It's difficult to speak about the position of WAPES members because it's all over the world, and the world is very diverse. But Ingeus is a proof that privates can also be specialized in difficult-to-place people. So I think most important is that do both. According to the means, according to the resources, according to the capacities that you have. I think it's more important that you focus on what you are really good in, instead of saying, oh, we are doing this and you are doing this. Because I think if, let's say that public employment services are only dealing with the very vulnerable people, if somebody then has to go to the public employment service, the job seeker will say, oh, I have to go there. That means that I don't have any chances on the labor market. I don't think this is good. I think we have to avoid this. On the other hand, the employer will say, oh, here you have somebody from the public employment service. What will they send me again? So I think for both, it's not so good. It's better that everybody is doing their best and working together, cooperating. Sometimes you have to be very quick and you need to have a training for somebody, for example. Vulnerable people mostly need some trainings. And in the most of public employment service, the trainings are delivered only by privates. In some public employment services, they are delivered also by them. For example, I think in Bosnia, in Belgium, the public employment services are delivering trainings also. Is it better? Is it worse? I don't know.
Okay, that's a clear answer. Agostino, what's your view on that, on the creaming or not creaming approach?
This is a very good question because with this question I can try to explain our models and the Assolavoro approach about this item. For us, is not a good idea to split population and to divide between public because everybody must be able with our professionality to guarantee some services. For us, our slogan is in the cooperation with the public services, public governance and the private operativity, operation. And in all agreement that we have signed with the public, we have defined together population, job seeker or younger, on the disadvantaged people and so on. And we have defined the economic revenue for private and for public in order to the category of people and the placement consequently consequent to the. In this approach, everybody can do the best. And, but the question in this approach, the fundamental question is to avoid an overlapping between operators. Because when there is an overlapping, could be very dangerous situation in which, for example, private and public doesn't work well. So the question in Italy now is how we can ensure a continuous process, a tutor of the process who can take care of the person, the worker, and then to ensure the success of all the measures. This is what we are trying to put in the next legislation that we are trying to, in which we are discussing with the minister, and we think that this is a good way in order to change the approach also of public and the private agency.
Okay. It leads me to another question, which is indeed no one-size-fits-all approach, and we should try to best allocate the resources, but not segmenting too much, the job seekers. However, I think it is taken for granted today that more and more public and private employment services need to provide, customized, individualized, support to the job seekers. So how to reconcile the two? And maybe starting with you, Thérèse, because today actually, looking for a job and helping a job seeker to find a job, usually, and sometimes it's even more than just offering a job vacancy, especially for the most vulnerable workers. It might be helping them to find accommodation, to help them to find a transportation way, and so on. So how far do you go into this, individualization of the support you provide to the job seekers?
So I think that for people who are short-term unemployed, it can. The service can typically be fairly standardized and fairly light touch. But when someone has just come out of 5 years in prison, or someone is, for example, like a lot of our Saudi clients who are women, where we've just placed, over the last 3 years, 10,000 women in Saudi Arabia into jobs. These are Saudi citizens, and as women, they are often the first women in their families ever to go into paid employment. The challenges for them are really quite significant, and so the services are, for example, determining, helping them negotiate with their guardian about what a suitable place of employment would be. It is thinking through and working through with the family about, well, if they're at work, what's going to happen with the children, and how is that all going to be negotiated? And then it is dealing with how are you going to get to work when in that country then women are not allowed to drive, not allowed to catch buses, not allowed to walk in public, and not allowed to ride bicycles. How are they actually get to work? What are the childcare arrangements? How will they handle, like they don't have a model in their family for managing the workplace environment. So that's quite complicated for people. It's a transformation and a transformation of really soft skills as well as the hard skills for work. And
I think we should get another mic.
we need another mic, yeah. So then there are, there are so many different situations that people come to us with. Sometimes people are coming to us having slept rough in the streets of London or wherever for 5 years. So we're finding people accommodation. We're finding dog sitters for their dogs. Thank you very much.
So there is no interference.
Take this off. And then sometimes we have a lot of clients who have disabilities, so we are negotiating the amendment of the workplace, suitable duties, education of people who are going to be on their work teams. So there's a huge range of services that we're delivering, which are very much around who is this person, what is their story, what are their goals in life, what are the practical barriers, what are the psychological barriers, and how are we going to develop a plan which is highly individualised that helps them go from where they are into decent, lasting work.
Okay, thank you. Lenka, how far can the public employment services go in the individualization of the support to be provided to job seekers? During the WAPES conference, you published this very interesting research surveying your own members. And I remember one of the figures was that in some countries, a consultant for the public employment services could be responsible for hundreds or thousands of job seekers, within its portfolio. So how can you reconcile, having to deal with so many job seekers and at the same time trying to provide, tailor-made support to them?
Yeah, it depends on what you see, what you think about. I want first to say that the book will be published this summer. This is only the executive summary, and then you can have a book on demand. So go to our website, follow it up, and when you see it, you can ask it.
It's a very interesting research.
Yeah,
indeed,
it's the biggest survey in the world about the services offered by public employment services. About the number of files that every advisor has, of course, in some countries they can't follow them up. But when you were telling this, I was thinking of one of my daughters. She was a student, then she got her diploma, and then she registered at the Public Employment Service because it's compulsory. In Belgium, it's also compulsory to put your CV on internet. So she did this. She got an email from some person that was one of the clients of this advisor. And then she said, okay, and now I'm going on holiday. Student mentality, 3 months of holiday. After 2 weeks, she got a phone from a private employment service telling her, we found a job for you. So,
bad news.
Did the consultant do something? No, yes, I don't know. But that was a figure in the consultant's map. And she gave the right service to my daughter. My daughter was able to do everything on internet. So the right service was let her do everything. Yeah? Other people, of course, need much more help. And that is something that public employment service must develop towards. If job seekers are able to do it by themselves, let them do it by themselves. Of course, for an advisor, it's fun to have somebody very easy to play. You discuss a little bit and then tick, 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 they all found a job. That's very good. But that's not a good approach. A better approach is to really look at the person. What do you need? Do you need only this kind of service? Nothing, like my daughter, just a system. You use this. Do you need a lot? then maybe you will have to go to an organization like Ingeus to give you all what you need. And if you think this way, then the consultant can have, of course, a lot more of files.
Okay, so in a way, it's a kind of a multi-channeling. Depending on your profile, maybe you can use this tool or this
An
or the
orchestra.
tool. Yeah. Back to the orchestra.